So here we are, sharing secrets of the soil with me, your host, Regen Ray. Hello, soil lovers, Regen Ray here, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Soil. Today, we're going to be talking all about cover crops. My guest has been doing over 20 years of no-till farming and has really put a business together that not only sells seeds, but also educates. And if you know me, I love educating and inspiring people to think differently about our soils. Welcome to the show, Keith.
Thank you, Ray. It's good to be here and good to visit with people all around the world about soil, our favorite topic.
Absolutely. Well, soil lovers are going to be in for a treat today. So tell us a little bit about what Green Cover Seeds is all about, the business you work with.
Sure. No, we appreciate the opportunity. So Green Cover is owned and operated by myself and my brother. It's here in South Central Nebraska. So we're almost exactly right in the middle of the upper 48 states. So we're kind of just right in the center of the whole thing. We're living and operating this business right here on the farm that we grew up on. So we still farm a couple thousand acres in addition to having the seed business. And so, we are in this not just to sell seed, but we're in this to improve our own operation as well. Because, some of this land has been in our family for almost 150 years. And so we're very passionate about improving our own soil as well as helping others do the same thing. So, when we get some kind of crazy idea, or sometimes we see one of our customers try a crazy idea, we've got our own outside laboratory where we can go and experiment doing, the same or similar things. So we started Green Cover back in 2009. And because we started as a farm in doing this, and because we didn't have an existing seed business, our structure is significantly different than almost any of the other people around us selling cover crop seed, because we don't sell any hybrid seed corn, we don't sell any soybeans, we're not selling seed wheat, and people make a lot of money doing those things, but we didn't feel like that's where our interest was, mostly because there were already a lot of people doing those. There wasn't a real need for that. But there weren't very many people doing cover crop seeds itself. So that's what we specialize in. And I'll tell you a quick story, I guess, if you'd like, about how we got started, and because it's really shaped who we are as a business and how we've designed everything. So, we grew up, no-tilling, and, no-till was a real passion of ours. So we knew Gabe Brown and we knew Dwayne Beck and Jay Fuhrer, probably a lot of people you've had on your podcast. We knew them before we ever started Green Cover because we were very involved in the no-till organizations, no-till in the plains. And in 2006, a man named Ademir Caligari from Brazil came over to the United States. He spoke at the No-Till on the Plains conference. And he was showing us all these pictures of these really cool, diverse cover crop mixes, or cocktails, as he called them. And it was really a brand new concept for all of us here in the United States. And so Gabe Brown and Jay Fuhrer, they took that home, they took that back to North Dakota, and they did some experiments in the summer of 2006. And you've probably seen the pictures. They're pretty famous pictures. Anything they planted in a monoculture, it just burned up because they were super dry, super hot that year. Less than an inch of rain since they'd planted the cover crops. And so anything planted by itself burned up. But where they had this diverse mix, it looked great. It had all kinds of growth. And everybody's like, well, how could that happen? So we wanted to do the same thing, because the number one thing we were afraid of is that cover crops were going to take too much of our moisture. And so we applied for a little grant. We got like $5,000 from the Sustainable Ag Research Education, the SARE program here in the United States. Great little program that helps farmers get a little bit of funding to try things. And so we put moisture sensors at 1 foot, 2 foot, and 3 foot levels. And then we planted all these different cover crops. And what we saw across the course of the year, it was almost exactly what those guys saw in North Dakota, but we saw it on our moisture sensor charts. Anything planted in a monoculture, didn't matter what it was, whether it was vetch or soybeans or turnips, anything planted as a monoculture was a far heavier user of water than anything planted in a mix. And, I still don't know that I have a great explanation, But we saw it on our moisture sensors. Gabe and Jay saw it on those trials that they did. And there's been numerous other studies that have shown the power of the diverse mix. And so I tell that whole story because our business is really designed around creating customized, diverse mixes for people. We don't like to sell individual products unless we know somebody else is putting them in a mix, but we want to sell that diverse, customized mix. And so we've developed the SmartMix calculator, and we've developed all sorts of processes here at we have a facility in Nebraska and also one in Kansas. And we're just set up to make these 8, 10, 12-way mixes faster and more efficient than anybody else. And it's a difficult manufacturing model because everything is different. You're not making the same mix twice, but we feel it's the right thing to do for the farmer, and it's the right thing to do for the soil. So that's how we've set up our business, and that's what we do day in and day out. Last year we shipped enough seed to cover close to 1 million acres, and not all that was in mixes. Some of it went out, to people that were building their own mixes, or a lot of just cereal rye by itself. But a lot of that was in diverse, customized mixes, and we feel like we do that better than anybody else because that's our passion. That's how we started. That's what we saw from the beginning, and so that's what we've pushed ever since.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the fact that you're just not product focused. There's a big education arm to the business and that support. Was that something that you identified early on in the piece, that it's more important to show people how to use these mixes and the why rather than it just works? And for sure. Because, Ray, as well as I do, and all the listeners here, as farmers, we can be a little pig-headed. We can be a little stubborn, and we're not necessarily going to just accept what somebody says, but we like seeing things. And so we do a lot of test plots. We do a lot of videos where we can show people things, and it's just the best way. So from the very beginning, and I taught school for 10 years before I came back to the farm. My brother started farming right out of college with Dad. When Dad retired, I came back to the farm then, but I taught school for 10 years. So I had an education background. And so that was just a natural progression for us to enter into this thing with a real emphasis on education, because our marketing philosophy from the beginning, and it continues to this day, our marketing philosophy is if people understand what's going on in the soil, the only logical conclusion that they can come to is that they have to have cover crops at some point in the rotation, or I should actually say they need to have plants growing as often as possible. And for most people, that's going to involve a cover crop somewhere in their rotation. And so, that's really what we try to do, is we try to teach them what's going on in the soil, and then let them come to the conclusion that you've got to have a green plant growing if you want to fix your soil. And why is that green plant so important? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. So a green plant is the only way that the soil is getting the amount of carbon that it needs. Photosynthesis is the most important chemical formula in the world. CO2 plus H2O equals C6H12O6 plus O2. And so we got CO2, which, some people already are, and a lot of people will be getting paid to actually take that out of the atmosphere. You add it with water. You can't do this without water. But then plants have the unique ability to turn that into something of great value. And it starts out as glucose, just a simple sugar, carbohydrate sugar. But then the plants will take that carbon that they'll strip that carbon out of the glucose, and they'll combine it with all the minerals in the soil, and they'll will make thousands of different compounds and different products. And as a farmer, I'm not really growing corn or beans or wheat or hay. I'm really harvesting CO2 out of the atmosphere and turning it into something of value. And so as part of that process, not all the carbon that plant is making gets put into the plant. As much as 40 to 50% of that will get leaked out into the soil. And so that's where the soil is getting the majority of its carbon, is through these liquid root exudates. And again, hats off to your fellow Australian sister, Christine Jones. She's got such great teaching on the liquid carbon pathway, and And Christine has been here to our place a number of times. And one of the things I the most clearly remember her saying is that the carbon that comes into the soil through the root system, through the liquid carbon root exudates, it's 5 times more likely to become part of the organic matter than carbon from the decomposition pathway. So all my above ground biomass, the carbon that comes out of that decomposing, the liquid carbon from the roots is 5 times more likely to become part of the organic matter. So it's important that we have that residue up above, but more so from an erosion standpoint, from cooling the soil, preventing weeds, all those other things. But as far as getting carbon into the soil, that is more important for the roots to do that. And that's only going to happen if you have biology. You know, if those roots aren't finding biology to consume that and bring the services back, they're not going to put those root exudates out. And I don't know, you may have seen my talk on carbonomics. It's pretty widely available on YouTube and a number of different places, but I really show that relationship between the plants and the biology and how, you know, God designed them to work together. And that's why the only thing that's going to build soil is a green growing plant working in conjunction with a healthy, balanced biological soil microbiology or microbiome.
Yeah, absolutely. I think working in harmony and together is key. I think a lot of people get a little bit paralyzed because they know that maybe their soil isn't functioning right. Do you have to wait for your soil to be at a particular point, or is something better than nothing? Like just starting a cover crop, you're going to start that process even if the soil is not particularly active.
A great question. And absolutely, something is better than nothing. However, if your end goal is to try to establish perennials, which, you know, is the ultimate goal for building soil, those really deep-rooted perennials that you don't have to plant year after year. If that's your goal and your soil is tired and worn out and has been abused and beat up, don't start with the perennials because they're very expensive seed and they're difficult to establish. And so we like to start with the cheap things, start with the annuals. Essentially, it's you know, weeds are annuals for the most part, and that's how nature, you know, heals the soil. It starts with the things that establish quickly, grow fast, you know, have short growing seasons, but grow really aggressively during those seasons. And that's what we emulate with the annuals. And then we can get the soil prepared for the expensive perennial plantings. Or if your goal is just to build your soil, but you've only got these short windows of time between annual cropping systems, then you just have to pick the right annuals and give them 60 days to grow and, you know, get them out there and get out of the way. So yes, you need to start somewhere. And what you start with and when you plant it and how much you do, that's so dependent upon the context of your situation. So many factors that, you know, are involved with that. But that's what we help people do. We help people, you know, work their way through the decision-making process of, okay, annuals or perennials, warm season or cool season, grasses or broadleaves, legumes or non-legumes, you know, heavy seeding rate or light seeding rate. You know, do I need, you know, 15 different things in here, or is 4 or 5 sufficient? And so, you know, we kind of help people walk through that process, or then get on the SmartMix calculator, and that online tool kind of helps step them through some of those decision-making processes as well.
Yeah, that's so important to be empowered to know that it's unique for your farm. I know that a lot of farmers, or even just anyone, they want the quick wins, you know, like the silver bullet, like I need results next season. Yeah. With your approach, what are some of the quick wins, but more importantly, like what are the long-term wins, the delayed gratifications that people can start expecting, you know, and how long does that normally take?
Sure. Yeah. So, you know, the quick wins, and again, it just completely depends upon your crop rotation, but I'll speak to the most common one of who we work with here. You know, a lot of our customers and a lot of this area is in a corn soybean rotation, which, you know, it's difficult with cover crops because they're both harvested in the fall, they're both planted in the spring. And so, you know, they're growing during the peak time of growing season through the summer. And so in that scenario, the easy quick win is planting cereal rye after your corn and then planting soybeans into that the next spring, because cereal rye, massively deep rooted, fantastic sequester of nitrogen, a scavenger, just does so many good things. But because it does so many good things, it can be difficult to plant corn into it the next year, because corn is needs a lot of nitrogen. And if you don't really have a handle on your nutrient cycling, that cover crop rye can make your corn kind of yellowish because it's a nutrient deficiency. It's not an allelopathy, it's a nutrient deficiency. And so until you kind of get in the system, that's a difficult thing to do. But for soybeans don't need that nitrogen up front. In fact, you don't want them to have any soil nitrogen up front. You want to force them to create those associations with the rhizobia early and often, and make them be really aggressive fixers of nitrogen. So rye tying up all your soil nitrogen, it's a beautiful thing. And so that's the quick and easy, anybody can get a win with that. You can plant cereal rye late. Cereal rye is unique in its ability to germinate in 34-degree soils. At 38 degrees Fahrenheit and above, it's going to be photosynthesizing, stays green all winter long. It's just a fantastic plant for that. The only people that don't like cereal rye are the people that are growing a lot of wheat and certified seed wheat. And so it can become a problem in that. So you have to really be careful with that. But, for the guys that don't have the wheat in the rotation, that becomes really easy. If you do have wheat in your rotation, you've got a great opportunity. And this is where we did our study with our moisture sensors, as we planted all those cover crops after wheat. Because again, in our area, wheat is done using moisture at the end of June. We're harvesting it at the beginning of July, and we're not planting corn until the 1st of May. So we've got 11 months where that soil is essentially, doing nothing. It's growing nothing. And there's no way that our soil can hold the moisture in most years that we would get in an 11-month period. So we just as well utilize some of that to grow a cover crop, to grow some nitrogen, to grow supplemental forage for livestock. That's another really quick win for a lot of guys. If they have livestock and you can integrate it in there, man, guys have seen some fantastic gains and some really good, very fast return on investment, by putting that through a cow or a sheep or any kind of livestock when done properly. And I need to stress when done properly, because we're kind of poster children for sometimes not doing it right. And not doing it right is when you overgraze it, you leave your animals in one area too long, and you will send your soil backwards with improper grazing. You will send it forwards in a hurry when you do it right. And it's not easy. It's an art form, and the guys that do it right are really, really good at it. And they're very willing to share their secrets too. So tons of good YouTube videos on how to do the amp grazing, the high intensity, quick movement type grazing that is really beneficial for the soil.
Yeah.
And then, the other long-term benefits, of course, so those are some of the quick ones. The long-term benefits, it's going to be building the organic matter. Really, that's, if you can only know one thing about a soil, what is your organic matter level? Because it just controls all the other functions of the soil. Organic matter is 58% carbon, and it's that carbon storehouse that feeds your biology in times of drought. It's what gets you through in tough times. It's your long-term savings. It's your investments. And so as you use cover crops, or as you have plants growing more of the time, you're just putting more and more carbon into the soil that accumulates into that organic matter, and that just makes the whole system better. High pH and low pH matter less in high organic matter soils than they do in low organic matter soils. It just makes everything better. And so that's the biggest long-term benefit. And then, of course, as you build that, your soil biology is going to grow. That community gets more diverse, it gets more robust, and those biological organisms then step into the roles that they were created to do, with producing nutrients through fixation, through cycling nutrients, through the whole scavenging process. And they start doing the role they're created to do. And then you can start cutting back on your inputs. You can use less fertilizer. You'll have less diseases. There'll be fewer weeds. We have to put all those inputs in. I call it welfare in my carbonomics talk, because that's what we're doing. We're essentially giving the system a handout, but we have to do less of that when we have the biology fulfilling the roles that they were created to do.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. It just sounds so natural and poetic almost to farm this way. Where do you think we went a little bit off the rails to go into this, highly tilled and monocultured systems? Like, do you have a thought of like why we lost our way and why is it taking so long to get back on track?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, tillage has been going on for thousands of years, as a method to, seed bed preparation, weed control. And we no longer need to do it for seed bed preparation because we have such good no-till equipment now. So anybody that says they have to use tillage to prepare a seed bed, unless it's just an extenuating circumstance, it probably just means they don't have the right equipment in order to no-till through. Because we've no-tilled through some really heavy residue, heavy cover crops, and a lot of guys have. If you have the right equipment and you have it adjusted right, that's not going to be an issue. Now, if you're organic, you may have to still do some tillage to, sometimes, terminate a cover crop, because if it's not at the right stage to use a roller crimper, there's situations, it's a tool. I'm not saying you should never use tillage. I'm not saying you should never use chemicals. They're each tools.
Yeah.
But when we overuse them, number one, it's expensive. And that's why a lot of farmers aren't making very much money, because they're overusing their tools. And number two, it's all a disturbance to the system, whether it's a physical disturbance through tillage or it's a chemical and biological disturbance through these synthetic inputs, whether it's a herbicide or a fertilizer. Those are all disturbing the natural system. And so not only is it expensive, but it also takes away from the balance that you've been trying to create. So use them when you need to, but don't overuse them, and try to come up with creative ways of working around that. So I think where we really got off the rails, most people would say it was after World War II. We had all of the Haber-Bosch factories producing all this nitrogen to make bombs during the war. And when the war was over, hey, we've got the ability to make nitrogen now. We know nitrogen is needed by plants to grow. We can start cranking out really cheap fertilizer. And so that's what they did. And, initially they saw, great results, from putting that on. But as we went down that path, and as they discovered how to mine phosphorus and just make all of these things available out of a jug or out of a tank or out of a sprayer, it slowly and incrementally displaced the biology and what they were originally doing. And so the more that we did that, the more the biology got depressed, and then the more our crops needed it. So we became more and more and more dependent on it the more that we used, which, that's a perfect description of an addiction, right? The more you use, the more you need.
Yeah.
And that's essentially where we're at in a lot of modern agriculture, is we're addicted to a lot of these inputs. Whereas, prior to World War II, for the most part, everybody was organic because there weren't chemicals and these fertilizers, so we're not that many generations removed from everybody really being organic. The advantage that we have now, though, Ray, is that with the science that we have, we understand a lot more of what's going on. Now, the scientists, Christine Jones and Chris Nichols and Jill Clapperton, they'll all tell you, we know such a tiny fraction of what's going on in the soil. Yeah. But we know a whole lot more than they did 100 years ago. And so we're able to take that and we can leverage that, and we understand, okay, this is why diversity is important, and this is why this plant is important. And I'm really excited about what the next 10, 15, 20 years is going to bring with additional scientific discoveries of unlocking some of the secrets of this is what this root exudate is, and this is what it's doing. And so this cover crop will produce this exudate, which stimulates this biology, which now gives these benefits to my next cash crop. That's where I see this all going, is that once we understand that, we can now custom design our cover crop mixes, not based on what we see happening above the ground, because that's kind of all we can do right now, but based on what's going on below the ground, and especially at where the biology intersects and interacts with the root exudates. And then we can really pick the right mix for your next cash crop based on that. To me, that's really exciting. We're not there yet. We're a long ways away from that, but technology is moving pretty quickly. And, you can get for a few $100 now, you can get a DNA analysis of your soil, which, 10 years ago was just science fiction to be even talking about. So, 10 years, down the road from now, we'll have some pretty powerful tools at our disposal.
And I think also the other link of that now we've got the plant, but then how does that transfer into the human and the human biome and the mental health of the human based on the soil biology, joining all those links. And I agree. We know more about the deep oceans and Mars than what we do with our own surface, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
And I think, so, somewhere along the lines, we just thought we knew how it worked, and it kind of got, shoved in a corner and forgotten about. And then we realized we've depleted it. And there's a few more signals to say, oh, this is urgent to understand a little bit more about that. I'm curious in regards to a comment you mentioned before in regards to competition and stealing water and nutrients when you have so many plants working together. But we're going to answer that question after a quick break. So soil lovers, stick with us. Hey soil lovers, do you want some merchandise that you can wear your love for soil on your sleeves, literally? This one says, sorry, I can't, my plants need me. Or maybe you want some stickers that say, I love soil, or get outside and get your hands dirty. Doesn't matter what merchandise you're after, I've set up an online shop that will help you get the soil loving vibes that you need on you. Maybe it's something in your home, like this I love soil pillowcase. All the designs can be mixed and matched on different things. And the reason why I set this up is because I want to help you start the conversation with your friends and family about your love for soil. And it's much easier when you're wearing a t-shirt that maybe gets them thinking about, why are you wearing that? And also the small little profits that come from the web shop help fund this podcast. So if you want to support my work and the Secrets of the Soil podcast, then I encourage you to head over to secretsofthesoil.com, click on our merch tab where you can mix and match, and there's different types of things. You can even get drink bottles or coffee cups, caps, tote bags, and all the designs can be kind of cross-messaged. A few more here, if you love my get outside and get your hands dirty, that is also available on a t-shirt like this. And then we also have born to garden and forced to work, which is probably what a lot of people are doing right now when they're listening to this podcast. So head over to secretsofthesoil.com, click on the merchandise tab so you can browse some of the amazing products that we have. It is completely outsourced. I don't do any of the packing, shipping, or printing. There is an organic range as well. So if you're more conscious about where the cotton and fibers are coming from, this was the only platform that was able to have a full cotton organic range. But love for you to go over and support and wear your love for the soil on yourself, literally. So with that, back to the show. Welcome back, soil lovers. You're hanging out with Regen Ray and Keith from Green Cover. We're talking about the companion planting system, I guess, or, a lot of people said, oh, we need to remove all the weeds because it's in competition with my cropping and so forth. And now we're seeing that cover crops are working in harmony with each other, and some are giving, some are taking. What's your take on this whole, the weeds are there combating and competing with my crops rather than working with it, and how are we breaking those paradigms?
Yeah, great question. And we oftentimes get that question, well, why can't I just let my weeds grow and that'll be my cover crop? And there may be instances where that's better than doing nothing.
Yeah.
But the thing with cover crops are we can pick the things that are going to do better things for the soil. And what I mean by that is most weeds, for the most part, aren't highly mycorrhizal. So number one, they grow in a bacterially dominated, high nitrate environment soil. So the reason they're growing is because we provided the environment for them to grow. But if we want to shift our environment, we need to shift the plants that are out there to help do that. And so we want to select plants that are more highly mycorrhizal. So things like flax and oats and barley and sunflowers, and really all of the legumes are great for hosting mycorrhizal populations. And we want things too that aren't going to make a big seed bank. Most weeds are really, really good at making seed, and that's how they survive. And so with cover crops, we can select things that aren't going to go reproductive, let alone make seed. We don't really even want them going reproductive, because you get so much more carbon pumped into the soil during the vegetative stage of growing versus the reproductive stage. Because at reproduction, they're pulling all the nutrients out of the roots, out of the stems, out of the leaves. They're pulling all that out and putting it into the seed. Now, if that all stays out in the field, you're not really necessarily losing that, but you've lost the opportunity for longer vegetative growth where you get more biomass and you get more carbon into the soil through your root exudate. So with well-designed cover crop mixes, we can, number one, prevent seed production and thus have longer reproductive or longer vegetative growth periods. We can also choose things that we know are going to be really good for grazing or really good for nitrogen production if that's our goal. So a lot of it just depends on what is your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? Most people wouldn't say, well, my goal is to produce the biggest weed seed bank as possible. So if that's not your goal, you shouldn't just let weeds become your cover crop. You should choose things that are going to help you advance to that. And as far as the whole competition thing, if you stop and think about it, Ray, the most competitive thing to a plant is another plant exactly like it sitting right next to it, because their roots are at the same depth, their canopies at the same height. They need the same nutrient and water requirements as everybody else around them. That's a hugely competitive environment, because now you're competing with people just like you, and you're competing for the same things at the same time. Conversely, if everything that's surrounding me is a different type of plant, and the roots are at different depths and the canopy is at a different height, they have different nutrient needs and different water needs, or at least different timings of these things, that's a far less competitive environment now, because now, I have my own roots at this depth, and I have my own canopy here, and I have my own needs. And the scientists have even observed in the laboratory these plants sharing nutrients back and forth with each other, but only when they're connected through the mycorrhizal network. Plant roots will never physically intersect to share those things, but the mycorrhiza will intersect, or they can be part of both root systems, and that network ties it together, and it just allows that sharing. And I think that's what we saw when we did our moisture experiments back in 2008. That's what Gabe and Jay saw up in North Dakota when they did those experiments in the summer of 2006. They saw these diverse mixes being more cooperative and less competitive because they were diverse, and it's not all the same thing demanding the same nutrient requirements and moisture requirements all at the same time. So far less competitive environment in that diverse system as what a monoculture is.
Yeah, so well put. And I agree, they're working together, and the mycorrhizal fungi. And for those who don't know what the mycorrhizal fungi is, maybe this is the first time they're listening to an episode. Can you speak a little bit about that and the importance, and what is it, and how is it different from roots? Because when you look at an image, it sometimes looks like roots and it gets mistaken.
It does. It can look like roots on an image. And first of all, you won't see that with your naked eye. You see those images under a microscope typically, because it's happening at a very microscopic level. But essentially, it's a fungal organism that grows from the root. So part of that fungus is actually growing inside the root. And then the hyphal network, and just think of it as like a big, very fragile, fine cobweb spreading throughout the soil. All of those hyphal fungi can dissolve liquid. They'll turn the rocks, the minerals, they can turn that into liquid. They can bring it back to the plant. They can draw in water. They can take carbon back out. They allow plants to communicate with each other. So it's a very unique organism that colonizes a plant root, and it's not specific to a single plant. And that's what makes it really powerful. The same exact mycorrhiza fungi organism can be hosted by a corn plant. The hyphae can grow out through the soil, and it can actually colonize a soybean plant as well. So it's the same organism tying these things together. And so then that becomes a bridge for these plants to share information, to share nutrients, to share water. And the thing about these are, because most biology that people are familiar with are bacteria, you can grow them in a lab, you can increase populations extremely fast. You can't do that with mycorrhiza fungi. The only real way to reproduce them is to let them grow. And so the things that kill mycorrhiza, number one, long fallow periods, where nothing is growing because they have to have a plant host to feed them. And number two, tillage is it's extremely damaging to them because they have built this network throughout your soil. And if you go through with the disc, you're just completely disrupting their whole network, and you set them back a long ways. And then the third thing that will encourage a plant to not host mycorrhiza is excess fertilizers in the soil, particularly phosphorus, because mycorrhiza are extremely efficient at bringing phosphorus out of the soil. But if you're giving your plant phosphorus through synthetic fertilizers, that plant has no motivation to encourage the mycorrhiza colonization.
Yeah. So well said. And, it almost makes you realize the Mother Nature had its own internet, World Wide Web before we even did. We thought we were smart connecting each other together. And yet here is the nature world connecting all the plants.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Communicating and trading. And, they're doing research now on forests where, parent trees and daughter trees are all working together and speaking and succession. And there's this whole communication line happening that we still don't really understand or can tap into it, but it's definitely there. And it's really groundbreaking to see all this research happening. And, if some people still sit in this fence of like, nah, this sounds a little bit too woo-woo, a bit too crazy, but I'm sure the trees are looking at us going, how do they talk? They don't have a mycelium network to talk to each other, So I always like that when it comes up on the internet. Do you have a story or a case study or an example of someone you've worked with that saved, a lot of money in the inputs? Because I think that's one of the points is that, and like you said before, it's an addiction to these inputs. I, one point said we need to have like regen rehab where we take people through the rehab of, of getting off these chemical addictions. What kind of savings can people see or reduction? And especially with the price of all these inputs going really high now, a 10% might not have been a lot 5 years ago, but a 10% on the bottom line is bigger these days. What's a case study that you could share with us?
Well, I mean, the one that is probably the most impressive and the most, the largest savings, because he's doing it on such scale, would be Rick Clark. And I don't know if you've had Rick on your podcast or not. He'd be a great one to get. So Rick is a friend of ours. We've been working with him. He's probably doing true no-till organic, and no-till organic is, I always say it's the holy grail of soil health, because now you're eliminating not only your synthetic inputs in order to be organic, but you're also eliminating tillage, which, most organic guys still have some level of dependency upon tillage. Well, Rick is pretty well no-till organic. He will do a tillage pass every now and again, but only on certain fields and not wide scale. And so, I've heard Rick speak many, many times, and he talks about, and he's doing this on, 4,000 or 5,000 acres. It's not like he's doing it on 50 acres. He's doing it on a very large scale. So Rick is in Indiana, and has really taken the leap. Used to be a conventional farmer, so he's got all those numbers of how much he used to spend, and now essentially he spends money on seed, and that's it. He is starting to use a few biological amendments. He didn't think he needed them, but the last talk I heard him give is that he thinks there's something that can be gained by using some of those, and particularly in situations where maybe it's land that isn't in as good a shape, or maybe it suffered through a drought last year, some things like that he'll use. And he's integrating cattle into the operation as well, which certainly helps. And so I can't remember the exact numbers of what he said. Again, you can go on YouTube and find a number of his talks, but he's saving millions of dollars because he's doing it across such scale. But you think about it, if you are eliminating your fertilizers, you're eliminating your chemicals, you're eliminating the need for tillage, which is expensive because it takes big tractors, big equipment, lots of diesel fuel, all those things. If you're eliminating all that, you've probably eliminated 80% of your expenses.
And
so
even
that would be the best example I have.
Yeah. And time on tractors, most farmers don't bill their time, it's just them sitting on a tractor. They don't know what that actually costs if they were going to put someone on the tractor to do it for them. And so there's a lot of hidden costs and mental fatigue, decision-making, the right day, the right weather, the right this, all those decision fatigues means that you can focus on more other important things or family time or other things that are more.
Yeah, he's basically just on the tractor, to plant, and he's doing a lot of roller crimping and row roller crimping and things like that. So, really your goal should be to spend enough time on the tractor to make sure you can listen to all the Regenerate podcasts that are out there. And, beyond that, you don't really need that much more, right?
That's right. The farm between your ears, while you're on the tractor.
That's right.
I've had your website up on my screen in the background, and there's this amazing photo of a crimper seeder, all in one action type of thing happening. Is that how you recommend the seeds to be kind of planted? And can you talk a little bit more of the mechanics of how these seeds get mixed and go into the soil?
Yeah. So, a lot of our seed mixes are, going to be 8, 10, 12 different species. And there's going to be different sizes of seeds, and some cool season, some warm season. And people ask all the time, well, do I need to plant my small seeds separate from the large seeds? And, if you're set up that way, great. We can certainly do that. But 95% of the people are not. They've got one drill, one box. We mix it all together. You put it in the box and you go out and you plant it. And is it going to be a perfectly evenly distributed stand? Probably not. But that's okay, because there's nothing perfectly evenly distributed in nature either. That is not a natural thing.
Yeah.
And so, we mix all these seeds together. What we find is that we don't get a lot of seed separation with a diverse enough mix. If you have peas and turnips, a large round seed and a small round seed, they're going to separate very quickly. But if you start putting in oats and buckwheat and sunflowers, things that are different shapes, different sizes, and oats especially, it's got that kind of that rough seed hull. It really helps tie things together, and things don't want to move apart nearly as quickly or nearly as much. You just don't have a lot of issues with that seed separation. So yeah, the vast majority goes out all mixed. We mix it all together right here. We can put inoculants on if you're going to get it planted in a timely fashion. And then you dump it in your drill and you go. And that works out really well. Now, other guys, they're growing some of their own oats or their rye or things. And so they'll buy the radishes and the vetch and the turnips and clovers and things, and they'll make their own mix on the farm. And they're doing even less of a thorough mixing job than we are. A lot of times they'll just kind of layer it into their drill, or they'll dump a bag in as the auger is feeding it up into the air seeder. It doesn't have to be perfect, guys. It will work. And it doesn't have to be perfectly even, because nothing in nature is perfectly distributed.
Yeah. Look at any forest, look at any garden bed that has things coming up naturally. It's all.
And the other thing that's really, really cool, and I would really encourage anybody that's doing this, pay close attention, because if you go out and plant a 12-way mix across, let's say 100 acres, you can go to 10 different places in the field. And if you were only looking at that particular location, it's going to look like you planted 10 different things, because these cover crops different things will express themselves based on soil conditions, based on cropping history, based on soil types, the biology that's there. And so if we were better at reading and understanding, well, how comes I have more sunflowers here than I have here? How comes the cowpeas look great here, but over here they don't hardly show up? It's trying to tell us something. We're not smart enough yet to know exactly what it's telling us. Yeah. But it's telling us what the soil is wanting, and it just needed more cowpeas here. The sunflowers, something about the biology just triggered sunflower growth here, but not over here. So we don't yet understand how to interpret that, but it's really interesting to see the diversity throughout your field of what gets expressed. And don't think that that's because you did a bad job planting it. It's just that the soil conditions are calling for different things to express themselves more in certain areas.
Yeah, that would be so magical to actually see, putting out a mixed cover crop and then seeing how it expresses itself differently, and just to show how the soil can change so much within 100 meters or 200 meters.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. And I think the more people that capture that data, I know you're saying that, we don't understand it yet and the research isn't there, but the more data we collect, the easier it is for people to join those dots later. Yeah. I love that whole, using your paddocks as a research lab. doing experiments in your own paddocks and going, oh, that's interesting observation. I don't know how to make that meaningful information yet, but maybe someday one will, so the more you journal and collect the data, the better.
Sure. And one other quick thing there, and again, to give a shout out to one of your fellow countrymen here, we just were blessed to spend some time with Tom and Cassie Robinson. They were over here, and Tom has some really fascinating data. He started doing some sap testing on some of his cover crops. And it's really interesting to see some of those results. And again, it's one test 1 year, but we're going to try to do more. I know he's going to do more. John Kemp and some of the AEA guys are going to do some. We're going to try to compile all this. But the one thing that we saw with that, and Christine Jones has been saying this for years, is that flax is an incredible plant. It's not very big. It's not very impressive out in the field. But the flax sap tested higher in almost every mineral that was tested than everything else. And for such a little plant, it's a relatively inexpensive seed. It doesn't cost that much to throw a couple pounds of flax in. Christine Jones always says it punches above its weight, and it just gives you more than what you would expect by what you see. And these sap tests showed that. It was just higher in almost everything, accumulated minerals. Really cool plant. So we're going to continue some of that kind of, I wouldn't even call it research. It's just collecting some data and then trying to figure out what it looks like. But shout out to Tom for kind of initiating some of that.
Christine Jones, someone who was also very much ahead of her time, got a lot of pushback from a lot of people in the industry in the early days, and just stuck with it and charged forward. And, now very sought after. Her talks are just absolutely amazing. If you haven't heard of Christine Jones, stop living under a rock, because, the way that she articulates things is just so common sense. You just watch her video and go, why is this not how everybody farms, or how everybody understands how things function? Really scientific side of things out, and articulates it in a way where you just get it. You leave going, wow, what happened?
Yeah. And we had, Christine's done some webinars. She did a 4-part webinar series for us. And so Rick Clark, the guy that I was telling you about, that's probably the best example. Every talk that he gives, every talk I've heard him give, he says, if you don't do anything else, go to Green Cover's YouTube channel and listen to those Christine Jones webinars, because they're really that good. She's really that good. So yeah, absolutely. Make sure you get your fill of Dr. Jones.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll pop some of those links around the video or audio show notes, depending on the way that you're listening to it. Keith, we have been yarning for a very long time, and we're at the point where we are going to become the voice of the soil. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Excellent. Well, Keith, you have become the soil. You've embodied its energy, its vibration. You have a mouthpiece. What would you say to us on planet Earth as the voice of the soil?
Yeah, as I was thinking about this question, the thing that keeps popping into my mind, I don't know if you've seen this movie or not, Little Shop of Horrors, but in this movie, there's this plant that keeps saying, feed me, Seymour, feed me.
Yes.
And I think that's what the soil is telling us. It needs to be fed. And the only way it's getting fed is by having a green growing plant out there as often as possible. So, feed the soil, keep it covered, and basically you're only going to accomplish that if you have plants growing out there as often as possible. So, feed me, Ray, feed me.
We're done. And in that shop of horrors, you're feeding it blood, which is like thirsty on the human.
Well, yeah,
But I love that analogy, and I'm going to see if we can cut to a little graphical of that in the video version. Because I know that show very well, and
it's got a special place in my heart because my wife is named Audrey, and so the plant is named Audrey too, and so it's just really bad. So yeah, don't feed it blood, but you need to nurture it and feed it, because God has given us stewardship over the resources, and that's one of the things we need to do is make sure that it is fed and covered, fed and clothed, just like a kid.
Yep. Got to nurture it, care for it, and feed it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Keith, what is one thing that you wish everyone woke up tomorrow morning with and knew in their brain when it comes to soil?
I think it would just simply be the fact that the soil is a living ecosystem, and it needs to be treated as such. For so many years as farmers, and I'm including myself in this, we just treated it as a medium that held up our plants. And, we could add the fertilizers and the herbicides, and we could do all that for it. And that worked well for a while. And we produced, really good crops and, but it came at a big expense, and it came at the expense of the biology. And so just simply the fact that there is such a living ecosystem going on there. And, we are stewards of that ecosystem, and everything that we do affects it. And so we need to really think through the decisions that we make. How is that going to affect that whole ecosystem?
Love that. Well, Keith, it's been amazing hanging out with you. How can soil lovers hang out more with Green Cover?
Well, we've got lots and lots and lots of videos on our YouTube channel. So go to YouTube and, subscribe to the Green Cover channel. We've got a website that has all kinds of resources. We actually just came out with our 9th edition Soil Health Resource Guide. We put one of these out every year, and we have articles from, Christine Jones and the Gabe Browns and Ray Archuletas. We write some of the articles, but we really get a lot of people, the experts from around the world, to write for us. You can download this for free. If you're here in the States, you can email us and we'll send you a free copy. Unfortunately, we don't have the budget to send them internationally, but they're all available as free downloads. And you can download all the past ones too. Each one is unique and different, and just has a plethora of information on there. And then the third thing would be, play around with the SmartMix calculator. Again, it's set up for United States zip codes, but you can kind of trick the system and you can set up an account. You just have to start it with a US zip code. So if you're in a different country, just try to find an area in the United States that has a similar climate to yours, and then put that in, and there's no cost to it, so you're not risking anything. And set it up and just start playing around.
Love that. I think the number one used zip code internationally, Beverly Hills, because of the show. Everyone knows Beverly 90210, whatever it's called. But I definitely have to trick the system sometimes. But I like that idea of like finding a zip code that maybe that's another tool, a zip code to other parts of the world calculator. Someone can build that.
Sure.
But your website is just full of information. You've got webinar replays, resources, guides, articles, things to presentations, books. It's just full of wealth and knowledge. And I think that's a true testament to the ability to educate and sell products. So many people sell the products and keep all the other stuff secret sauce and hidden. And, and I think that hybrid version, is really key. And that's the way nature works. It just gives, it doesn't keep anything secret, so kudos to you and the team for setting all that up.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to have you visit our website, and if you're in the area, stop by and visit. We'd love to give you a tour too. Excellent.
I'll hold you to that one when we come to our US tour. Teal and I are looking to see how we can, in the next couple of years, run an event.
Yeah, that'd be great. Love to host you.
Excellent. Sounds good. Well, there you go, soil lovers, all the links, and make sure you go and check out the free guide and hang out on the YouTube channel. Definitely something you should be listening to when you're doing other things and just feeding the paddock between your ears. Keith, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom today.
Thank you, Ray. I enjoyed it very much.
Excellent. Well, there you go, soil lovers. Until next time, make sure that you get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into the wonderful world of soil. I'll catch you on the next show. Well, soil lovers, that's enough secrets for one episode. I really hope that you enjoyed all the secrets shared during this conversation. But hey, let's not keep it a secret. Please share this podcast around and make sure that you like it and leave us a review, because that really helps spread the secrets of the soil. Until next time, remember, get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into your soils.